Okay, I have the pleasure to have Josh Friedman, a friend of mine here in the Zoom call. He was just a few days ago in Kiev and will tell us what he experienced. I'll quickly switch to German, so the German viewers will also understand what I'm talking about. Also ich habe jetzt hier ein Gespräch, ein Interview mit Josh Friedman, einem amerikanischen Journalisten, der Freund von mir ist, und der war vor wenigen Tagen in Kiew und wird uns in diesem Video von seinen Erfahrungen berichten. Ich habe mir hier einige Fragen angeschaut, vorbereitet, und ich denke mal, das könnte sehr interessant werden. Okay, Josh, maybe just a quick introduction of yourself so everyone knows who you are.
As you mentioned, my name's Josh Friedman. I'm from the United States, from California, but I've been living abroad and traveling as a journalist and correspondent for much of the past 7 years or so. Was based in Bulgaria for a while, spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, and I've done reporting in a lot of places around the world. And I write for a handful of different publications, and I also post on YouTube.
Also er ist Journalist aus Kalifornien, ist in den letzten 7 Jahren als Journalist und Korrespondent unterwegs gewesen und schreibt für eine Reihe von Publikationen und hat auch seinen YouTube-Kanal. Josh, wie bist du nach Kiew gekommen, um erstmal die erste Frage zu machen? So Josh, how did you get to Kiev, or how did you get first to Ukraine? How is, obviously you can't take a flight to the airport. How was getting there? How was that for you?
It's not like the old days where I would just fly in. No, I flew into Poland. I flew into Krakow. And then a friend of mine graciously drove myself as well as another German independent journalist. So a friend of mine graciously drove us into Ukraine, and we were actually trying to initially drive to Kiev, but that didn't work out based on timing and a couple other factors. So we ended up taking a train from this small city called Stry in Western Ukraine, not too far away from Lviv, and just took a train right into Kiev. And I guess I should mention, we avoided the main border crossing, the one that's directly in line with Lviv. We avoided that one, and we went to one that is south of there a little ways, up in the mountains. It's a bit more remote. Granted, when we crossed the border at that time, even though it was a bit more remote, there was a huge line of both cars and pedestrians trying to exit Ukraine. It wasn't the case getting in. There wasn't much of a line, as you might imagine.
Also er ist in Krakau gelandet, und von dort hat ein Freund ihn und einen deutschen Journalisten über die Grenze gebracht. Zunächst wollten sie nach Kiew fahren, haben einen kleineren Grenzübergang genommen, südlich des Hauptgrenzübergangs in Nähe von Lemberg. Und von dort haben sie dann einen Zug genommen in der Nähe von Lemberg und sind mit dem nach Kiew gefahren. Josh, wie ist es mit den Zügen? Wie regelmäßig verkehren die noch? Fühlt man sich in denen sicher? Und wie weit fahren die von der Frontlinie entfernt nach Kiew rein? So Josh, how safe are the trains? How safe do you feel? How far? How is it difficult? And how far away from the front line are they when they get to Kiev?
Initially, I had some concerns about the train ride into Kiev. Granted, at that point, though, I wasn't so familiar with where exactly the fighting was, and particularly the fighting around the outskirts of the city. On the train ride in, there were pretty much next to no concerns or protocols that we as passengers were made aware of. That's not necessarily to say that there weren't concerns, but we didn't have to do anything like lowering the blinds so that the windows are covered on my train ride. Skipping ahead a week, my train ride from Kiev to Lviv, which obviously came deeper into the war. At that point, people on trains were being instructed to, at night, to have the windows shut so that there's no light coming out of the window. But on my train ride into Kiev, we weren't told to do anything like that. I had the window open, I was looking outside, and what I wasn't hearing any explosions. Granted, the timing was such that there actually was a big or a pretty loud explosion from what I was told just before I arrived in Kiev, but I missed that one. So it was a fairly uneventful train ride into Kiev.
Just so only on the way back they asked you for special precautions.
Yeah, on the way back, they told us to keep as soon as the sun went down, to lower the blinds or whatever they were, to cover the window.
Also auf dem Weg hin gab es überhaupt keine Einschränkungen. Man hat gemütlich aus den Fenstern rausgeschaut, und auf dem Rückweg hingegen wurde ihnen dann gesagt, sie sollen die Sichtschutz, also die Blenden runterlassen, damit kein Licht nach außen dringt. Josh, wie sieht es mit Transporten aus? War das ein reiner Zivilverkehr? Ich werde ihn diesbezüglich auch darauf hinweisen, dass er die Frage nicht zu beantworten braucht, wenn er glaubt, dass es die Ukrainer irgendwie gefährdet. So Josh, first of all, before we come to this question and to others, I think both of us are not impartial in this conflict. At least I guess it about you. I know that about myself. And thus, I don't want you to tell me things where you think you might endanger people in Ukraine or the Ukrainian government or whatever. So this, just to put up front, if there's something where you think that might be critical, just tell me that you don't want to answer it right now, maybe after all of this is over. So how was it when you were on the train? Was it purely civilian? Did they bring in supplies? Did you see soldiers on board that were using it?
Like I said, that train ride was very uneventful, but the interesting thing was that when we showed up at that station in this small city in Western Ukraine, we weren't able to board the first train to Kiev, because we were told that first train was sold out, and the explanation we got was that there were, I'm trying to recall exactly the wording, they said something like there are a bunch of soldiers on the train heading into Kiev, and because of that, there wasn't a seat available on that first train, so we had to wait to catch the second one. And they might not have said soldiers, because they might have been referring to foreigners who joined the Legion who were coming in, but I'm not sure. They definitely told us something along the lines of, let's just say, fighters, for lack of a better word, were on that first train, and it was all full and we couldn't get on that one. But then the train we got on was basically empty. I've ridden the intercity trains in Ukraine many times, and that was the emptiest train I'd ever been on in Ukraine.
So just a follow-on question: in the train you were, did they put up any signs to indicate that there are civilians on board, like red crosses or something?
I did not see any of those. Now, that this first train that we're talking about that I caught, I boarded it at around 1 or 2 in the morning, and it was dark and it was a rush to get on there. So possibly I missed something, but I was under the impression that there weren't any precautions, but maybe there were and I just wasn't aware of them.
But you are also saying that even though it was empty with people, it wasn't stuffed full with weapons or just with food, with any supplies?
I saw no supplies, no weapons on there.
Interesting. Also ist zunächst der erste Zug, den er nehmen wollte, da hieß es, der sei ausgebucht, und er kann sich nicht genau daran erinnern, was es war. Also er sagt, im Endeffekt haben sie ihm sozusagen gesagt, der Zug sei voll mit Kämpfern für Kiew. Und den zweiten, den sie genommen hat, der war praktisch leer. Er kann sich an keinerlei Nachschub an Bord erinnern, was sehr seltsam ist, dass sie einen Zug leer nach Kiew fahren lassen. Und was er auch sagt, es war eigentlich nachts. Dadurch, dass es nachts war, hat er nicht viel gesehen, aber er hat auch nicht gesehen, dass der Zug, der mit Zivilisten, wo er dann drin war mit anderen Zivilisten, dass der irgendwie mit Rote Kreuzfahnen oder sowas markiert war, sodass, um einen Angriff zu vermeiden. Also die Reise nach Kiew war relativ unspektakulär, denke ich. Wie ist es dann, als du angekommen bist? Hast du dich irgendwie akkreditieren müssen, als dass du eine Markierung bekommst als Journalist und nicht als Spion in irgendeiner Art und Weise Probleme bekommst? So when you obviously, it seems like getting into Kiev was fairly uneventful and unproblematic. Once you were there, did you have to register somewhere to get accredited so you wouldn't get any problems with soldiers, militias, or by with them thinking you might be a spy, as you probably have know that they say there were a lot of saboteurs and killer commandos and whatever. And even now, I still read that they supposedly are still Russian special forces within the city.
Actually, I have a bit of a funny story relating to that on the way out, the way out of the country in the West, not in Kiev. And maybe I should add one more thing really quickly about that initial trains. So if you're not familiar with the trains in Ukraine, but you could probably imagine it to be the case, there are many wagons. So I was only on one wagon and I wasn't walking from wagon to wagon to wagon. So I don't know what could have been on that train, but it seemed normal to me with the exception of it being very empty. But anyway, getting into Kiev, I had already been applying through a publication that I write for in California for accreditation before I entered the country. The process wasn't. I don't know what was going on that. You apply through the defense ministry, and I don't know what's going on their end. Whether they're too busy, they're flooded with applications, or they've got much more important stuff than to check who's applying for accreditation. I don't know. So I ultimately didn't get an answer, which my answer was yes, I was given accreditation, but I didn't get that until I had already been there for 5 days or so. So almost all the time that I was there in Ukraine and in the Kiev region doing reporting, I was doing so without the formal accreditation of the defense ministry. But it didn't seem like the soldiers and the militia members and the other people manning checkpoints, they didn't seem to care about that whatsoever. And that I can say that in contrast to when I was in Armenia during the Nagorno-Karabakh war a year and a half ago. There were definitely times where if you just show them your own personal press pass from some publication, they didn't want that. They would want the actual formal one from the foreign ministry. In Armenia, it was the foreign ministry that was issuing them. But that wasn't the case in Ukraine. I was, for the most part, when I'd be driving around, we would just get asked for our passport, not even our press badge. And they would see a US passport, German passport, and often that would be enough. When they would ask us for our press badges, I would just give them the one from my California publication, and that was a non-issue.
Just two quick follow-on questions. First, how long have you been in Kiev? And secondly, when you were there, did you wear like body armor and helmet with press on, or were you just wearing civilian clothing?
Yeah, I was wearing body armor. My vest says press. The helmet, I was not wearing the helmet the majority of the time. I was only wearing the helmet when I was going into areas where I was fairly close to combat. But yeah, almost all the time when I'd be walking around or driving around, I had the vest on, and the vest says press on it. And also, our driver, we had one driver who was taking us around everywhere in Kiev and in the region. He put a little press sign in the car also. in the windshield.
How many days have you been in Kiev?
I spent a little more than 4 days in
Okay.
Kiev.
Also er hat sich um eine Akkreditierung bemüht, die haben sie ihm allerdings nicht ausgestellt bis ziemlich zum Schluss. Es hat sich praktisch keiner dafür interessiert. Wenn er den US-Pass vorgezeigt hat und sein Begleiter den deutschen Pass, dann war das für alle praktisch ausreichend. Und das war ganz anders, als er in Nagorno-Karabach im Zweiten Bergkarabach-Krieg in Armenien war. Dort haben die normalen Presseausweise für die meisten Leute nicht gereicht. Die wollten eine Akkreditierung des Außenministeriums des Armenischen. Hier war das Verteidigungsministerium zuständig. Die hatten ihm eine Akkreditierung erteilt, aber irgendwie ist vergessen, nicht schnell genug ihm zugeteilt. Und die ganze Zeit, ich habe ihn noch gefragt, die ganze Zeit hat er eine Schutzweste getragen, schön mit Presse drauf, und er hat auch einen Helm, aber den hat er eigentlich nur in der Nähe der Frontlinie getragen, und sein Fahrer hat so ein Presseschild drauf gehabt. Wie streng waren die Kontrollen und wurden die Fotos kontrolliert, die du gemacht hattest? Und ich würde jetzt schon mal erwarten, dass du keinen Minder dabei hattest, nach dem, was du erzählt hast. So how strict have been the checkpoints, the controls of your person? Did they check what pictures you take? Did they tell you what pictures not to take? And I guess, hearing what you already told me, you probably didn't have like a minder to make sure that you don't poke your nose into the wrong corners.
No, I did not have a minder, but there are many checkpoints, a really, really, really large amount of checkpoints all over the place. There were a few times when, maybe even more than a few times, at least several times, in which police or soldiers, or actually the first time was on the border, some border, not even sure what position he was, and I think he was Polish, not Ukrainian, but he wanted to go through our photos. In the case, my phone, I was taking photos and videos on my phone. There were several times where police or soldiers or some sort of official wanted to check out my phone and my colleague's camera.
Okay. Also er hat keinen Minder gehabt. Es gab massenhaft Kontrollen, und viele Male wurde er von Polizei oder Soldaten darum gebeten, dass sie seine Fotos und Videos anschauen können, die er mit dem Handy gemacht hatte. Wo genau in Kiew warst du, und warst du außerhalb von Kiew noch irgendwo in der Nähe der Front? Where exactly in Kiev have you been, and have you been apart from Kiev, have you been close to the front anywhere else?
Yeah, the main location where I got close to the action was in Irpin. I spent several hours one day in Irpin. I was not on the front, and I don't think I was at risk. At least at the time, I didn't think I was at risk there. What happened the following day made me rethink that a little bit. But anyway, I don't know if you or your viewers are familiar with the layout there at all. There's this area that's become kind of at the time, I guess it was becoming kind of infamous, where there were refugees pouring out of Irpin, pouring out of the areas where they're fighting and making their way toward Kiev. And there's this area in Irpin that's close to Kiev where there's a blown out bridge and a river crossing, and refugees are being evacuated and need to cross the river on this makeshift bridge that's underneath and beside the blown out end of the bridge. And I was there filming if you want, I could direct you to the area. So
yeah,
it's northwest. Yeah, there we go. All right, so you're go a little back to where you were before.
Maybe you should do it.
Okay, you're in your pin. Okay,
yeah.
All right, stop right there. All right, so I was somewhere around, what does that say? Down P30, something like that. All right, okay, so we got, yeah. I don't know quite how to direct you. 'Cause I want to point at the screen, but I know you can't see what I'm
Yeah,
doing. There's
yeah,
a river. There's a river, and
yeah.
you're scrolling right along that. No, not that river. It's
This one
smaller
here.
to the
Okay.
south and, and to the east. You see where it says Oblast,
Yeah,
Kiev
yeah.
Oblast, and Kiev
Yes.
City?
This one here.
So yeah, right there. So there's a little highway that goes through the green. You see the green patch? That's forest. When you're
Okay.
going
Uh-huh.
when you're going from Kiev to Irpin, there's forest on both sides of you,
Uh-huh.
and there's a road or highway, whatever you want to call it, that connects from Kiev to Irpin, and that road connects to this bridge that's blown out, and the Irpin River runs beneath it, and that's where there was this crossing where many journalists were staged, and just one after another, there's refugee after refugee coming across, most of them walking, but some of them being carried in stretchers, and some of the people carried on stretchers were alive and some were dead. The dead ones were carried on blankets, and
Hmm.
some of the people who were alive and being carried on stretchers, they looked like they were barely alive.
Okay. Now I need to find out how to, God damn it, how to finish. There it is. Okay. How to go back to finish the, how can I finish showing what I just did? Go back to the cameras.
To get out of the
Yeah. Okay,
share
that's
screen,
it.
just click
That's
on
it.
the share screen.
Okay. First time using Zoom,
That
not
might-
ideal. Not ideal.
That might be a lot to translate right there. If
Ja,
you need
so
to stop
ja,
talking.
ja. Also das einzige Mal, wo er wirklich nahe der Action war in Irpin. Und wenn ich ihn richtig verstanden habe, war die Brücke, die wir also die Brücke, die wir aus den Bildern kennen. Und das war auf der Karte, die ich gezeigt habe, in dem Zentrum, wo dieses Baumsymbol ist. Und dort waren lauter Journalisten und auch andere Journalisten. Und er hat dort die Leute gesehen, wie sie über dieses Brückenwrack rübergehen. Und viele davon waren verletzt. Und es waren auch Tote dabei und Schwerverletzte, die dorthin transportiert wurden. By the way, if you have pictures and interesting videos, don't hold back to show them to the viewers, because obviously I don't know what images you have to share. So just feel free to add something here.
From Irpin, I have tons of photos and videos.
Do you want to show anything to explain maybe how the situation was, something that
Sure.
wasn't maybe on all the pictures that went through the big agencies?
Sure. All right, then I'll share my screen. No, you need to allow me to share screen.
Holy moly. I have no idea how that even works.
It should be in settings. Well, or I don't.
Maybe this. Try now. Gave permission to record local files. That seems to be the most. Does it work?
No, I'm trying to remember from your end. I've done this before, but I'm not looking at it from your end. There's some.
I can turn you to become the host, I guess, but I don't know if the recording stops then. Maybe we should finish the first video here, because we are not that far away from the 40 minutes when Zoom, because both of us are cheap and we don't have a pro account, so we have to make a second video anyways. Maybe you can just host then and give me the permission, and we can continue there in the second video.
All right, that works.
Okay, also wir beenden kurz das Video, denn wir beide sind Geizhälse und haben keinen Pro-Account, und weil ich nicht in der Lage war, ihm die Erlaubnis zu erteilen, seinen Bildschirm zu teilen, damit wir die Bilder und Videos sehen können, die er gemacht haben. Also es geht, im zweiten Video geht es damit weiter, und dann wird er hoffentlich in der Lage sein, uns zu zeigen, wie es geht. Okay, see you in a moment.
All right.